unlocking your world of creativity with best-selling author and brand innovator, Mark Stinson. This episode is brought to you by White Cloud Coffee Roasters, where every bean tells a story of adventure. Visit whitecloudcoffee.com and use the code CREATIVITY.
Welcome back, friends, to our podcast, Your World of Creativity. We're continuing our around-the-world journeys to talk to creative practitioners everywhere about how they get inspired, about how they organize ideas, and of course, how they gain the confidence and connections to get our work out into the world. And today, our creative passport is being stamped in Sydney, Australia, and we're talking to designer, creative director, and founder of his own design firm, Ben Rennie. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, and more exciting, the author of a recently released book, Lessons in Creativity. Congratulations on the book.
Yeah, thank you. It's quite daunting to have this idea of something you spend 4 years working on, finally out into the world and in people's hands, and they get to read all your darkest, deepest secrets.
Yes.
It felt like at one point you were writing in private, but now they're obviously not private anymore.
That's right. And then let's talk about that journey. And I'm sure it's captured in the book, but you've worked with some of the world's biggest brands, Nike, Patagonia, Ray-Ban, so many more. But let's go back and see what sparked your journey into this world of design and creativity, and how did you evolve that into this global brand and UX agency?
Yeah, it's so interesting. My journey was a late comer to design and almost self-taught. And it came about by moving into the world of brands and working brand side. So working with a brand out of the UK called Box Fresh, and then eventually working with Ray-Ban and a few other really beautiful brands like that I fell in love with. But I also fell in love with the process behind the scenes about how these things were made. So in my 30s, my background was always sales and marketing. I was entrepreneurial. I'd started a clothing label when I was young, had some early success and some massive failures and that roller coaster of up and down. And it wasn't until transitioning my career in my sort of early 30s and becoming a parent that I started to understand what it was that I was drawn to. And design was definitely part of that. Creativity came a bit later. I started to understand creativity a bit later, but it was definitely design and making. I just found I spent a lot of time in Italy touring through factories manufacturing eyewear, and my first obsession was the difference between mass manufacturing something, which was fascinating, and also handmade. And that was my initial understanding of the two. And then I suppose joining the dots was, what's the role we could play to communicate those differences through branding and strategy and marketing? And that's where I started to build out my agency work. And at the end of a corporate career selling big brands, decided to flip the switch and try to market them and design them and play that role.
Yes, exciting. And you've talked about the power of creativity and how you came to it. So let's get into the book a little bit, the lessons in creativity. You really emphasize that creativity is not just for artists. It's really essential to a lot of work and, well, relationships, personal fulfillment. What was the moment for you where you felt like embracing creativity was not just about work?
Yeah, for sure. Two things to this. One is writing the book, you're just forced to look back, to go back and join the dots looking back on your life. So I never really understood this until I started writing the book, and that was a 4-year process. But if I can go back to early days with my mum and dad driving, we lived in country New South Wales, which is 5 hours west of Sydney. And mum had a bit of an obsession with dropping into old knick-knack stores, like secondhand stores with
Yes.
little bits and pieces. And we'd go through these stores from a very young age, and mum would always pick things up and say, if this could talk, I wonder what it would tell us. And I never got that. And I always thought that was a really strange thing. But as I got older, I become really obsessed in the same conversation. And to me, that's this sort of development of creativity around understanding the stories that things can tell, but also understanding that someone somewhere made that. Someone somewhere took the time to have an idea to build it. And I became really obsessed with that over time. And of course, it started for me in making a t-shirt label and putting really creative slogans on the front, and then turning that into sort of a graphic art and following my sort of creative instincts to bring that to life and see what I could make. But yeah, it definitely comes back to early days of walking into knick-knack stores and having a mum that was really connected to the stories behind things. I think that was really important.
Maybe we can even pick up on the title then. Share a lesson or two that you really want to communicate in the book.
Yeah, I can share a statistic actually. When I started writing, before I wrote the book, I read the statistic that 96% of kids believe they're creative, whereas only 26% of adults do. And that was the sort of catalyst for me to go, God, that's a problem. Like for me, I feel creativity is when I came to understand it, and I call this creative confidence, and understood that it was a superpower or something that I could use to my advantage to solve problems, to walk into rooms that previously I felt really nervous walking into, and that sort of imposter syndrome of, go, how am I here? And it's creative choices that we make prior to the places we end up that determine where we go. And so a couple of lessons for me. One is, and I'll share a really broad example, is when I was working at Luxottica, I was invited to the launch of the Dolce Gabbana nightclub in Milan, which is during the day it was a cafe and at night it was a nightclub. And this was called Gold. And I think if you Google it, you can see it. It's no longer there, but you can Google it, and some really old, beautiful photos of this place. It was very opulent. When you walk down a red carpet and you've never done anything but worked in sales and marketing, you start to question what you're there for. And then you walk into the room of, there's a lot of famous people in the room there, like Ronaldinho was there, the soccer player, and a lot of actors. I think Valentino Rossi, the motorcycle rider, was there. So you start to walk into the room, and I'm in my $100 suit that I bought from my local shopping center.
Right.
And so imposter syndrome is on your shoulder, chatting to you about, you don't belong here. You haven't done anything to achieve this. When I look back on that and I started to write the book, I actually believe that I did belong there, and I was invited there for a reason. And it was because of the tough choices you make prior to that. And that's creativity, right? It's the ability to problem solve. And when we look at it, Seth Godin talks about business or work as art. And he says, and when you ship your art, and your art can be accounting, it can be sales or marketing, it's the ability to solve a problem, package it, believe in it, and put it out into the world. And when I wrote my book and I look back on those parts of my life, whilst in those moments I was terrified, at the same time, when I reflect on those, I question that fear. And the antidote to that fear is creativity. It's the creative confidence to believe that I got there for a reason, and those reasons were the belief that I made a series of challenging decisions that people recognized, that escalated my opportunities to stand in rooms that were new.
Yes. I wanted to pick up on that word ship, because boy, we talk about all the creative blocks and obstacles in the world, but that last one, hitting the send button, is often the worst one, isn't it? It's like showing up, getting the work out into the world. How did you, especially in writing the book, finally come to the point when you said, this is going to ship? Ready or not, here I come.
Yeah. I've been writing for 25 years. Do you remember Blogger? Remember Blogger?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure.
Yeah, I was an early blogger with my really ugly, awful blog. And interestingly, discovered Seth Godin a long time ago, and he started really early. And I was really connected to his lizard on the shoulder, you're this sort of person in your ear telling you can't or you shouldn't, or to wait. And the more I read Seth, the more I started to ignore that little lizard brain and start to focus on my own creative confidence. And still today, if I do a LinkedIn post, like I write an article every Wednesday, and I do this for my own personal benefit. It's to build confidence, to put something out into the world that scares me a little bit. But again, I sit on the go button for an hour and I read it 15 times over, and I don't actually change anything. I'm just trying to understand the process for me about what do people think of me when this goes out into the world. And I think the answer to that is nothing. They don't think about me. They just think about the article and they think about the words, and then they apply those words to them. And a really interesting thing. So during that blogging period of writing, I was up to about 20,000 readers a week in its peak. And one of the things, we did a research piece, and we found that the best articles that we wrote, the really insightful ones, didn't get shared, whereas the dumb ones got shared all the time, right? And when we did some survey and research into this, the reason is because the really insightful ones, people in business wanted to keep that for themselves. They wanted to walk into a meeting with that insight as their armory, right? To go, okay, I've just learned something. I can bring this to my meeting today and I can use this as mine. And I think that's cool. I think that people should do that, because the more we bring it into our armory, the more insight we have for our life and the better we can evolve, right? And that also builds creative confidence. So for me, I thought, you know what, if the ideas aren't out there, then those connections don't happen. And what happens over time is that builds a connection point back to me over trust. So irrespective of what people think of me, they don't really think of me at all, but they think about the piece, and that's your art. So for me, it came back to, it's a representation of my values. It's going to be written in a way that is representative of me and my value system. But at the same time, people are interested in what they can take from it. So that was and I found that could give me a lot of confidence. I found that motivating.
Yes. Yes, for sure. We also talk about creativity as a tool. new habits, fresh narratives, maybe seeing things. I always think about creative people not coming up with ideas, but seeing things differently than maybe other people have seen them before. Look at it and take a fresh perspective. What kind of strategies and mindset shifts do we need to take as creatives, for sure, but as any working person, to maybe break out of those ruts?
Yeah, we need to reframe failure. I think there's a real stigma around getting things wrong and making mistakes. And if you're not afraid to, if you're too scared to be wrong, then you're never going to really be right. I did a post 3 or 4 years ago around learning from failure and the importance of failure and how that just outweighed all of my successes. And I got a good friend of mine who I love dearly emailed me back and said, he's a principal of a school. And he said, that's wrong. We don't talk about failure at school because we need to learn from our successes. And I wonder, how do we get successful without understanding, how do we address the hard times? And it's a question, Ken Robinson talks a lot about education and how schools are educating us out of creativity. And so I haven't gone into that level of research around education, so I can't verify whether that's true or not. But when you get an email from a principal saying we don't talk about failure, we only want to talk about success to children, then we're stigmatizing something that's very important, which is just learning, there's two ends of the scale. So I've had some businesses which has gone really badly. I had a company with 30 people, and not long after we decided to wind that up because it just wasn't viable anymore. When you're sitting with 8 company cars on lease on your front lawn, wondering what to do with them, it's quite a terrifying place to be. But what you realize is that you're going to be okay. It's just a moment in time, and then it's just another problem to solve. And whilst it's terrifying and daunting, and I must admit, I didn't deal with it very well in that moment, but at 50, I can reflect on that. And I know next time that happens, I'm going to be okay. So if we don't address the troughs, those little low moments, because that's success too. So when we fail at something and we get stuck in this trough or this rut, and whether that is business, whether it's a job, a loss of a job, which we can fail at as well, someone else's career, we can work for someone else and still fail at that. But that doesn't mean we can't succeed at the next place. I got really brave around the idea of looking at those lows and trying to understand what happened. What did I do to get there?
Right.
And then trying to understand the people around me that helped me rise above that. And it comes back to your community of people that you trust, love and connection with the people around you who know that irrespective of whether you win or lose, your relationships stay the same.
For sure. I love this thought process, this mindset, as we say. But is there an actionable step? Somebody's facing this fear. They really want to engage. They really want to get their work out. Is there something tangible or physical or a step they can take to get to the over that?
Oh man, that's a really good question. 78,000 words on creativity, and I don't think I answered that.
It'll be in my review.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's really personal. I actually think we all approach roadblocks differently. So one of the things that I like to do is reflection. So I pause. So if I go to a meeting, like there was a long period of time there, I don't do this anymore, but there was a long period where I'd get there half an hour early because I was always scared. And that half an hour was my moment to reset, calm down. And by the time the client got there, anything that was sitting, knotting in my stomach is gone. You can't just be nervous all day. So I would get there early. And then by the time that environment or that meeting kicked off, I felt like I was in a better place. I definitely don't do that now. I walk in a minute before and hustle. But the reason I did that then was because of nerves and just that awkwardness. But in terms of one sort of silver bullet to address a roadblock, I don't know what that is. I'm not sure. For me, at a very personal level, it's breathing and giving myself some patience to reinforce my creative confidence. I definitely like to pause and reflect and then take a step forward. There's a story I write in the book about when I was really stuck in my job working at Luxottica. I felt really creatively stifled when I started to learn about creativity. It was like a mirror back to my life. And I'm like, hang on, I'm not being creative. I need to be more creative. And the way I addressed that was to go and do things that I did in my youth. And one of the things I did was took up skateboarding. And this is in my mid 30s, knee pads, helmet, wrist guards, the whole thing. My business career was obviously way more valuable than breaking both wrists on a skateboard.
Exactly.
But when I started that, because I remember being really good at it as a kid. So I went to a skate park in Sydney and I stood at the top of a 10-foot skate ramp. And I don't know if you've ever done this, but it's a long way down when you're 10 foot up. That's the height of a basketball hoop, right?
Yes.
And I stood at the top and my brain, I'd created this sort of illusion that I can do this still, and I didn't need the gap in between. So I stood at the top and I dropped in skateboarding, they call it dropping into the ramp. And I actually blacked out when I did that, but I stood there for a good 7 to 8 minutes before I did it. I dropped in, and I don't know what the catalyst was to get me to drop in, but I think it was fear of other people's opinions of me up there. People were there waiting for me to go, and then peer pressure was the thing that I decided to go, okay, I'm going to drop in. An old man came up and I was laying on the ground as I fell into the skate ramp, and he said, he said, mate, it looked like you were diving into a swimming pool, not a skate ramp. And so I can't imagine what it looked like to everyone else, but it was peer pressure that forced me to do it. That was my way of searching for a creative reset. And luckily I found a better way, but that was, for me, that was peer pressure, which pushed me into that. And my better way now is creative confidence and actually coming back and saying, in this moment, I'm going to be okay. I know I'm going to be okay.
Good insights. Thanks for sharing that. Well, listeners, I'm talking with Ben Rennie. He's the author of a new book called Lessons in Creativity. And Ben, I want to talk to you about another tangent of your career and your work. But first, I want to make sure people can connect with you and find you and learn more about your work. Where can we do that?
Yeah, you can find me on probably LinkedIn and Instagram are my two favorite. LinkedIn, I'm a bit of hit and miss on. I have these moments of overwhelm in LinkedIn, but then I know how important it is. So you can find me on LinkedIn, just in my name, Ben Rennie, or you can find me on benrennie.com or on my Instagram, which is @benrennie, RENNIE.
Good deal. We'll put a link to the book in the show notes as well. So I want to talk about the intersection of creativity, especially design and technology and purpose-driven work. As the chair of design declares Australia, it's an advocacy for sustainability. You've really shown how design and technology can maybe shape some sustainable futures and better work in that area. Tell us about why that's important to you.
Yeah, I think we went with my first business. So my company now is called Rennie, which is RENY, and we can talk about the confusion around that name later. But my first iteration of this business was called 6.2, and we started this business to be the supporter of small business around growth, scale, solving complex problems. So we were basically a mini IDEO, so to speak. And we were really focused on, purpose. We wanted to be purposeful. We wanted to go and help businesses. We'd build an avatar about what that ultimate client looked like. But really quickly, and this happened really fast, within 2 to 3 years, our clients became Gulf Oil, Gas, Westpac Bank. We just really quickly morphed into advisors to elite fossil fuel companies, big business, big banks. And there was this point in 2018 where I was in Adelaide in the McLaren Vale, and McLaren Vale is this beautiful wine region and it's stunning. And you walk through these incredible vineyards that roll out into the ocean, and probably like your Napa Valley, just beautiful, right? So when you walk through there, and you're walking through nature, but you're walking into a boardroom, into an environment that you built, but it wasn't what you pictured. We never wanted to work with big corporates. We always wanted to, there was enough people doing that. So I had this I felt stuck in this business for a good year of going, God, what have we become? Because that was the thing that I was trying to escape from in corporate world when I was working for Luxottica. I wanted to go out and work with small businesses, creative businesses, but we'd become sort of advisors to the elite. And I remember going into that meeting, and there's 15 people around a room from a big bank. And I was really nervous and anxious, but I wasn't nervous and anxious about the work. I was nervous and anxious about what I was doing there and where I could be if I wasn't there. And I remember reading an article with Jerry Seinfeld when he was on set. And if he was struggling with something, he would wash his face 3 times with water for a reset, and it would change his mood. So I remember going into the bathroom and thinking, I'm just stuck in here, so I'm going to wash my face 3 times. And I'd come back to the meeting and nothing changed. I was still stuck in this sort of feeling of a rut or anxiety. I'm very anxious. So I actually left that meeting, got on a flight back to Sydney, sat down with my wife, and the next day I actually resigned from my own company. And the reason I did that is because I just felt like I'd built the wrong one. So I'm not saying that was a successful company. All companies are hard, and we definitely hadn't hit our sweet spot, but we were doing work that there's a lot of people in the world who can do that and do it better than us. So I thought, what can we do if we can bring that energy to these corporate organizations and use the same energy to bring to small people who need us? What would that look like? So we took a journey out into nature, and my wife and I and our 3 kids head off to the States for a bit of a reset. We went for a month into Lake Tahoe to be around nature. And it was really nature that was my catalyst to say, I want to build a business that protects this and that connects people back to nature in a way that is unique. And design is a catalyst for that. So design is this ability to, it's not just how something looks, it's what something does or how it behaves. So the role of design thinking goes beyond the ability just to make a logo. It's to go and connect what that logo represents and what that logo means to someone and what those values are that are attached to that logo. So that 1 month in nature became 3 months, and amazingly, it actually became 4 years. So I spent 4 years with my wife and 3 kids, what I call foraging for work. So trying to find the right clients, trying to find the right brands, trying to understand that we want to build brands that have intention around nature, community, climate, and health. And we wanted to be the support network for that around the development of ideas, the development of brands, and the execution of digital products. So that 4-year journey was probably the most rewarding 4-year period of my life, about outside of becoming a parent, but also the hardest. That was our life savings. If this didn't work, if we couldn't find the ability to build a business off the back of it, we'd lose everything. But there's this point in the book where I talk about, I couldn't afford not to, but I couldn't afford to do it either. So there's that sort of sticking point where it's, why not? Just go wander out into the world and see where it lands. That's pretty much where it took me. And that's where our connection back to B Corp, where a B Corp came from, and our ability to focus on impact. And that all that leads to Design Declares, which we can talk about as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And I love the verb foraging. It really connects with the nature idea for sure. But how difficult it is maybe to find all of those ideas and the intersections and the values and the principles that you're looking for.
Really hard. And that comes back to bravery too. Like when you're out in the world and you're meeting people, you've got to be brave enough to ask for the work. You've got to be brave enough to say, can I help? And taking confidence in the fact that we've done it before and we can do it again. We just wanted to do it differently for different people. And again, I don't like, we don't have a problem. We need fuel, we need energy, we need oil. So I don't have a problem with these businesses. But for me, I wanted to focus on transition. So rather than the established use of fuels and energy, which I completely appreciate and respect and know the world needs that, I just felt like I wanted to be part of the transition into new fuels and new energies and new ways to power the world. And whilst I don't have the answers for that, there's a lot of companies who do, and we want to just find ourselves trying to partner in that space to bring good to that.
Terrific. Thanks for sharing that story. Let's get back to the beginning then, and that's how the company took your name, changed the spelling a little bit, but there's a Ben Rennie and there's a Rennie with an R on it.
Oh my God. So, yeah, I said we're creative. Doesn't mean we always get it right. Oh God, that was a terrible decision. I've always been bad at naming anything. I've never ever had the ability to name things, yet I have this sort of also this narcissistic ego where I'm like, it's my business, so I will name it. And 6 weeks later, you're going, God, why don't I call it that? But when we had the first business, that business I mentioned in Adelaide that I resigned from, I was a partner with a friend of mine in Melbourne called Paul Breen. Wonderful human and a great business guy. And when I said, I'm done, I've got to leave for my mental health, he was 100% supportive and behind that. And when I came back into setting up the business and saying, okay, I know what I want to do now as an adult, I want to go out into the world and build this business, I rang a few of our old clients and we mutually split the business 2 ways. He took all the consultancy businesses and I took the design and development of assets business. So he wasn't interested in that. So it was a mutual easy part ways. Anyway, the first client I rang that I'd worked with in the past said, I'm setting up this business and we're a design agency and we're going to just focus on UX and brand. And he said, great, I'm in. What's it called? And I hadn't even considered a name for that. And interestingly, above my desk, there's a beautiful magazine out of the UK called Monocle magazine.
Love that magazine.
And I love it. So I had about 30 issues of Monocle magazine all lined up in numerical order above my desk. And as he asked me what the business was called, because I needed to send him a scope of work, I went, Monocle? And I said it really awkwardly, thinking, God, I hope he doesn't know this. And by the way, can I use it? And he responded with, oh, like the magazine. And I sheepishly thought, oh, maybe, yeah, I think so. So we actually called the business Monocle. I did all the searches in Australia, no registration, absolutely fine. So we called it Monocle. I thought that was a beautiful name. Anyway, of course, 3 years later, Monocle magazine was sold to Condé Nast, I think it's called. They then did a worldwide audit and came back to Australia and found me. And I got a nice little letter in the post from their law firm. And the letter said, you need to stop using the name. And secondly, how did you come up with the name? Did you copy us? And I replied to the letter and said, oh, yes, 100%. I copied you absolutely 100%.
Right down the ocean.
Yeah. So I told them and the lawyer wrote back and said, no one's ever been that honest with us. So we'll give you 90 days to change it over and any assets you can give back to us. And I said, absolutely fine. don't want to go to battle with those guys. So we, in that moment of changing names, we come up with Rennie, which is my surname. My creative confidence at the time said, oh my God, I can't call it my name. I'm not that successful yet. That's something famous people do. And then I had this little moment of Nike, 4 letters, the holy grail of a brand of 4 letters. So we changed Rennie to Reny. And pretty much since then, I get emails now with people spelling my last name Reny.
You're lucky you get the emails at all.
That's right. Exactly.
They're meant to find you if it's that hard.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I made it really hard for myself.
That's a great story. Ben, what a pleasure talking with you. Love all your thoughts, your work, and congrats on the book for sure.
Mate, so grateful for the time. I really appreciate it. It's really nice to catch up.
And listeners, be sure to check out the show notes for all the links. And like I said, we'll guide you towards the book. It's going to be a great read. And Ben, let's stay in touch. I know there's more stories to come for sure. Probably book 2 is already in the works, I'm sure.
Yeah, no doubt. I've already started. Mark, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, fantastic. And listeners, come back again next time. We're going to continue these round the world journeys. And it's all thanks to our sponsor, White Cloud Coffee Roasters. Without our sponsor, we couldn't invite guests like Ben to our show. Go to whitecloudcoffee.com. You can enjoy a 10% discount on any of the coffees there when you use the code CREATIVITY at checkout. So it's whitecloudcoffee.com. And of course, if you enjoyed this interview with Ben, don't forget to rate, review, subscribe on any of your favorite podcast platforms. And as I said, come back for our next episode. We'll continue to talk about inspiration, organization, and connection. But most of all, as we've heard today, some creative confidence to get our work out into the world. Until next time, I'm Mark Stinson, and we'll keep unlocking your world of creativity.